I'm very excited to be joined today by Christopher Perkins, president of CoinFund, to talk about traditional finance, cryptocurrency, and much more. Chris, welcome to Real Vision.
Thanks, Ash. I really appreciate you having me on today.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Before we get started talking about crypto and finance, tell us a little bit about your background. You have a fascinating one.
Well, I grew up in a place called Long Valley. I think, Ash, it's a place that you may know. We may call it God's country, something like that.
Yeah. So Chris and I, we should say, went to high school together. We didn't actually know each other in high school because while Chris was doing everything right, I was doing everything wrong. But we're fortunate to have reconnected here through some mutual friends to talk about cryptocurrency. It really is a strange and unusual coincidence, Chris, that you've been sort of rising quickly in this space. So much to talk about. But tell us a little bit about the context of how you got involved in finance, because it's a really I think impressive and sort of incredible backstory that you have.
Thanks, Ash. I think everyone who gets into crypto has a very unique story. Look, I left New Jersey, went off to the US Naval Academy, went to grad school, and then I went into this adventure called the United States Marine Corps. Like anyone from New Jersey, I immediately took orders to Hawaii, and I started the first part of my career in the Asia Pacific. And then 9/11 happened. And it changed everything for many of us. My sister was down at Battery Park. She was treated, lost some friends that day. And I decided rather than to get out, I was going to stay in and go beyond my mandatory service. I ended up volunteering to go into Iraq. The Marine Corps actually gave me orders to Mississippi. So I told them no. And they said, you can't do that. And I said, yes, I can. I was able to switch orders at the last minute. And I got orders into Iraq. I was dropped into Ramadi, Iraq in 2004, and this was some of the most challenging part of the fight. It was a very, very difficult counterinsurgency that I found myself in the middle of. I was part of the original shaping of the Battle of Fallujah. I worked under Jim Mattis, who many people know. But I spent the preponderance of my time in the city of Ramadi, and the city of Ramadi is about the size of Cincinnati. And every day we would leave the wire and we would be confronted with incredible violence. My job was to go out, help the populace. And really what I tried to do was to use my heart and my mind to win hearts and minds, whether that was building schools, engaging with the local populace, trying to facilitate safe elections. It was a very intense period. My unit, we took around 260 wounded. We had 15 killed in action. And it gave me incredible perspective. Because we had to learn how to operate where there was no rule of law. And every day you were out there armed with your ethics, trying to do the right thing in a pretty difficult fight. But anyway, after that, and it also gave me incredible perspective about what's important in life. And it also gave me a ton of impatience, because when you realize how short your time is in this life, you really want to move quickly and accomplish as much as possible, and frankly, help as many people as possible. So I pivoted back home, took command of an artillery battery, and then I realized that I wanted to try something different. I had orders to go into another part of the government, and at the same time, I met a girl. And that girl is now my wife, and she said, hey, there's this thing going on in finance. You might find it interesting. Didn't you serve with that guy in the Marine Corps down at Lehman Brothers? And I said, yeah, I did. And why don't you talk to him? So I literally walked into Lehman Brothers. He said, do you have a suit? Yeah, I've got a suit. Do you have a resume? Got one of those. And the next thing I knew, I made it. I just kicked the door in, and I got a job offer at Lehman Brothers. I made it into the associate class. I was surrounded by the top MBAs in the world, and I'd never taken a finance class. So I got into derivatives at that point. And wouldn't you know it, 18 months in, boss quit, said I can take this business. And I started building our derivatives prime brokerage. Was doing great, building it like crazy. Took it, building, and then boom, Lehman went bankrupt.
Chris, it's obviously been an extraordinary life, extraordinary service. Thank you for your service. First, before we even begin to talk about the more trivial matters of finance, the stories, the background that you've had is just an incredible story, a great American story, a success story, and one obviously of just incredible challenges that you've overcome in your life.
Oh, thanks. It was absolutely an honor to serve, and I'll do it all over again in a heartbeat.
So you get to Lehman Brothers, and we've talked a little bit about this before. What it must be like in those days where things are falling apart. Your experience that you've had, I mean, it must make this seem like relatively trivial when other people think the world is falling apart. To have that background, to have that context, to say, "Hey guys, no, I actually have seen what the world falling apart looks like." Tell us what that's like while you're there and you see this happening all around you.
Yeah, I remember leading up to the crisis, there's obviously issues out there. We saw what happened with Citi. And then I remember, I was running a decently sized derivatives book, and I'd always have to consolidate my risk when anytime something big was happening.
Tell folks what that means for people who haven't had the opportunity to be on a desk.
Yeah, so when you are running a trading book, you take risk, and I was running a prime brokerage book, so I was taking a lot of what's known as counterparty risk. So if the other side of my trade went bankrupt, I would have to, I would be taking risk, and I would have to hedge that risk out and potentially take losses. So risk management was a very important part of what I did. But I remember working one weekend when Bear Stearns went down, and out came one of the senior guys out of his office laughing and putting a $2 bill on the wall because they were sold to JP Morgan for $2. And so there was a degree of arrogance and denial. Hey, we don't have a problem here. But soon that narrative turned. And I remember we had an equity ticker on the floor. And, when things started going south, it was almost like when you go to pump gas and you see that meter going quickly, except in reverse. And so they ended up taking down that ticker at Lehman. When Lehman finally went bankrupt, I remember I had a 1-year-old, and I was at a 1-year-old birthday party on the weekend, and I got a call from the operations team, and they said, "Hey, I need you to come in. I need you to help us understand this risk." And I said, "Okay, guys, I'm at a birthday party. I'll be in give me an hour." And then 5 minutes later, the phone rang and said, "Forget it. We're, expletive." So the next day, you don't know what to do. You go into the office on Monday, and the world was falling apart. People were screaming. They were literally hiding under their desk. I remember one guy was running through saying, "Don't put anything in writing. We're all going to jail." And for me, I was getting shot at two years prior. So I answered the phone. Clients would be obviously upset. "Where's my money? Da da da." And I'd say, "Listen, I don't know, but I'll help you the best I can." And then the most interesting thing happened. I received a phone call from one of my clients. He said, "Chris, I've got a huge problem. I wired $35 million into you guys. It was an operational error. Can you help me?" Because what happens during a bankruptcy, that money settles and it kind of disappears.
Yeah, everyone basically becomes a general creditor, even if it were an operational error that should have been reversed under traditional operating times.
Exactly. So I found that wire. I somehow was able to get it reversed. And funny thing is, that guy became my first client when I moved banks. Anyway, phone rang, picked it up. It was Citi. And they said, "Do you want a job?" And I said, "Well, what kind of package do you have?" And they said, "It's an incredible package. It's called the job." And so I raced down on the C train and I started working at Lehman. And I started working at Citi. And that was fascinating as well, because as I showed up, remember I talked about counterparty risk. Well, all of my own trades were now defaulted. And so I had to clean up literally my own mess. Anyway, soon thereafter, global policymakers realized that the derivatives industry had problems. And Dodd-Frank came out. I raised my hand and I said, "Listen, I can take charge of this transition of the $700 trillion derivatives market from unregulated to regulated." And in the process, I had to build out a new business. It was called the regulated cleared business. And the fascinating thing was that, these laws and regulations were coming out in real time, thousands of pages. I've been in finance for 2 years, but at the same time, it was a level setting because everything was new. And wouldn't you know it, my head regulator was a guy named Gary Gensler. And so over the years, we took that industry and we migrated it into that regulated paradigm with Mr. Gensler as our regulator. It was an incredible journey there at Citi, and we built the top business in the world going through that transition. But pivoting to crypto for a second, if I'm honest with myself, the financial crisis, and I was in the heart of it, it was caused by centralization, right? We had centralized risk amongst a handful of players. If you look at what Dodd-Frank did and the global regulations did after that issue, they doubled down on centralization. They made it even more centralized, right? And one of the reasons why they did that was because they had no other choice. There's no technology out there. And so what regulators needed to do was to look at these, like consolidate the risk so they can look at it, collateralize it, control it.
For people who weren't in banking at the time or before, so this idea of centralization of risk, effectively what you had was fewer banks as counterparties, and perhaps more important, you have Dodd-Frank, so you have banks no longer serving as principals in these transactions, which thins the liquidity out. This effectively is the treatment to the 2007-2008 financial crisis, which actually has the possibility of raising the risk going forward, creating almost a kind of a tinderbox dry forest effect where a single spark can potentially create more risk in the system.
Exactly. So we took that $700 trillion worth of derivatives and we put them in these central clearinghouses. And yes, we've collateralized them. But if we're intellectually honest with each other, perhaps a better approach, a more thoughtful approach would have been to disseminate, to decentralize. But we didn't have the technology and the tools at the time. I think now we do.
Hey, if you like this clip, be sure to check out the full interview and more only on realvision.com/crypto. It's 100% free. Sign up now.